Hello aspirants, a very warm welcome to Scholar.com. This is Rohan Nagi, your faculty for economy, welcoming you on board for another discussion on 10th class NCERT. We have already completed our discussion on the 10th class NCERT chapter 1, which dealt about development. In this chapter we are going to discuss about the sectors of Indian economy, and predominantly this chapter is divided into two parts, so we are going to cover it in lecture number 2 and lecture number 3. So this is part number 1, that is the sectors of Indian economy, part 1, lecture 2. So without much of a further ado, let's begin. Right, so as you can see on your screens, we are going to talk about class 10 chapter 2, which is the sectors of Indian economy. This is lecture number 2, and the sectors of Indian economy is divided into two parts, as I've already told you. So when you talk about the sectors of Indian economy, what is a primary sector? When we produce a good by exploiting the natural resources, it is an activity of the primary sector, right? Like how we extract coal. So extraction of coal is a primary sector activity, is it not? Because coal is available naturally. Likewise, mining of minerals, that is also categorized as a activity restricted to the primary sector. Why? Because minerals are available in the nature freely and naturally, correct? At the same time, when you talk about agriculture, when you talk about horticulture, when you talk about all of these activities, they are also classified in the bracket of primary sector. Why are they classified in the bracket of primary sector? Is essentially because here you are using your what you can say, natural goods, right? You are exploiting your natural resources which are available freely, which are available naturally. Even fisheries or fishing or dairy or animal husbandry, these are also the activities which can be categorized under primary sector, right? Now why primary? This is because it forms the base for all other products that we subsequently make. कोल से हम इलेक्ट्रिसिटी बनाते हैं, एग्रीकल्चर से हमें ग्रेन्स और सीरियल्स मिलते हैं जिससे मैनी फूड प्रोडक्ट्स आर मेड, फिशरीज से हम आगे जाके उसको वी कैन यूज सी फूड फॉर डिफरेंट cuisines, dairy, animal husbandry, these things give us milk, cheese, paneer, right? These things also give us silk at times. So primary sector activities become the base for all the other products that we subsequently make. And since most of the natural products we get are from agriculture, dairy, fishing, forestry, this sector is also called as agriculture and related sector. इसे agriculture and allied sector भी कहा जाता है, right? So this primarily belongs to the primary sector. On your screens in the figure you can see that there are certain, it is basically a visual representation of the activities which are generally confined to the primary sector. Okay, so this is fairly easy to understand, no rocket science in this. Let's move on. Secondary sector is also known as the industrial sector. Now the secondary sector covers activities in which natural products are changed into other forms through ways of manufacturing that we associate with industrial activity. For example, लॉगिंग, जो हम जंगलों में जाके पेड़ काटते हैं, विच इज कॉल्ड एज लॉगिंग, दिस इज ए प्राइमरी सेक्टर एक्टिविटी, करेक्ट? लॉगिंग से हमें क्या मिलता है? वी गेट टिम्बर, वी गेट वुड, और इस टिम्बर या वुड से व्हाट कैन वी मेक? वी कैन मेक फर्नीचर, राइट? हमारे घर का जो फर्नीचर होता है उसे हम बना सकते हैं. इसके अलावा टिम्बर एंड वुड आर यूज फॉर वेरियस अदर मेकिंग वेरियस अदर प्रोडक्ट्स आल्सो. बट लेट्स टेक एन एग्जांपल ऑफ फर्नीचर. नाउ ये जो फर्नीचर बन रहा है, दिस विल बी अ पार्ट ऑफ द सेकेंडरी सेक्टर. okay, this will be a part of your secondary sector. This will be classified as a secondary sector activity, right? अब आप में इसको ये समझना है कि भैया फर्नीचर तो तभी बन पाएगा जब अ प्राइमरी सेक्टर एक्टिविटी ऑफ लॉगिंग इज डन. So without primary sector activities, secondary sector activities are very difficult to be achieved, right? And therefore it is said that secondary sector activities are those activities in which natural products are changed into other forms. जैसे wood is changed into a form of a sofa or a dining table or a chair, right? And this happens through an industrial activity, right? A lot of cutting, chopping, furnishing, polishing goes on, right? So that those activities will be considered as secondary sector activities. So quite rightly, it is the next step after the primary sector. The product is not produced by nature, but it has to be made, and therefore some process of manufacturing is essential. जैसे फर्नीचर को आपको पॉलिशिंग करना ही पड़ेगा, राइट? फर्नीचर को आपको एक शेप देना ही पड़ेगा, तो दिस इज अ पार्ट ऑफ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, राइट? And this sector gradually became associated with different kind of industries that came up, right? इसलिए इसको इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर भी कहा जाता है. जैसे आपको आयरन ओर इज नेचुरली एंड फ्रीली अवेलेबल, सो माइनिंग ऑफ आयरन ओर इज अ प्राइमरी सेक्टर एक्टिविटी. But once you converting that iron ore to steel is a secondary sector activity, right? And इस स्टील से जब आप मशीन्स बनाते हो या मशीन के पार्ट्स बनाते हो या बॉडीज ऑफ ऑटोमोबाइल्स बनाते हो, राइट? और व्हेन यू यूज दिस स्टील टू मेक वेरियस अदर व्हाट यू कैन से आर्टिकल्स, होममेड आर्टिकल्स, जो हमारा व्हाट यू कैन से द कटलरी दैट यू फाइंड इन द किचन. So all of this, converting iron ore into steel and then converting steel into all of these products, will be classified under the head of secondary sector activities. हालांकि mining of aluminium, mining of bauxite, mining of iron ore, that will be confined or that will be classified as a primary sector activity. So one can easily say that secondary sector activities are a next step after the primary sector activities, right? And secondary sector and its activities usually depend upon the primary sector, right? यहाँ पे आप एक शर्ट देख रहे हो, ये शर्ट भी कॉटन से बनी होगी, राइट? कॉटन तो फील्ड्स में बनता है, एग्रीकल्चरल फील्ड्स में बनता है, राइट? So cultivation of cotton will be confined or will be classified as a primary sector activity, correct? But then using that cotton to actually weave a shirt, that's a secondary sector activity, is it not? जैसे यहाँ पे you are looking at a shoe, right? So ये शू एक लेदर का बना होता है. लेदर कम्स फ्रॉम द प्रोसेस ऑफ टैनिंग. जब मरे हुए एनिमल्स जो होते हैं उनका हम वी एक्सट्रैक्ट देयर स्किन एंड वी इन द टैनरीज वी टेक दो स्किन्स एंड देन इट इज कन्वर्टेड इनटू लेदर, राइट? सो दैट टैनिंग एक्टिविटी और उसके पहले जो एक्टिविटी होती है, दैट इज स्किनिंग ऑफ एनिमल्स, दैट विल बी कन्फाइंड टू द प्राइमरी सेक्टर. बट टैनरीज में एक बार गया वो स्किन एंड व्हेन इट इज कन्वर्टेड इनटू लेदर, then that is a secondary activity which is subsequently used to make your shoes and jackets and whatnot, right? I have already given you the example of chair. So these are all the secondary sector examples, and you should understand why it is called as the industrial sector, because to convert anything that is naturally available into something which is usable, you require some level of industrial activity. Without any industrial processes, without any industrial activities, these things cannot take place or these things cannot be supplied, right? So this is the secondary sector. Now let's move on to the tertiary sector. This is a very interesting sector because this is a fairly modern sector which has come up. So this is a third category of activities that falls under tertiary sector, and it is different from the above two. These are the activities that help in the development of the primary and secondary sectors, right? So these activities by themselves do not produce a good, but they are in aid or in support for the production processes. So since these activities generate services rather than goods, the tertiary sector is also called as a service sector. जैसे प्राइमरी सेक्टर को हम एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर एंड एग्रीकल्चर एंड एलाइड सेक्टर कहते हैं, जैसे सेकेंडरी सेक्टर को हम इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर भी कहते हैं, वैसे ही टर्शियरी सेक्टर को हम सर्विस सेक्टर कह सकते हैं. द इसेंशियल फीचर ऑफ टर्शियरी सेक्टर इज दैट यहाँ पे गुड्स प्रोड्यूस नहीं होते. यहाँ पे यू आर डीलिंग इन सर्विसेज. व्हाट काइंड ऑफ सर्विसेज? लाइक ट्रांसपोर्ट. Transport is a service, right? Like banking is a service, right? Retail, जब आप रिटेल शॉप्स में कुछ बेचते हो, that is a service. Insurance, that is a service. Information and technology, that is a service. Entertainment, that is a service, right? Medical support, that is a service. education, that is a service. So these are all services. यहाँ पे कोई goods manufacture नहीं हो रहा है, right? But these are the services which will help people and which will aid people a lot in enriching their lives, and these are also the activities that aid or support for the production process. जैसे transport है, when you have to transport the timber from one place to another, this is a service, but this service is supporting what? This service is supporting the production process of a furniture, right? जैसे बैंकिंग हो गया, बैंकिंग से आपको लोन मिलता है, ये these loans can be used for agricultural purposes, these loans can be used for mining purposes, these loans can be used for setting up an industry. So the service of banking in the tertiary sector can help in enlarging and expanding the primary sector and the secondary sector as well. Okay, जैसे retail है, on your screens you can see a sabzi wala, right? A vegetable vendor, that vegetable vendor is selling the natural produce. So जब तक उस natural produce को, vegetables को sell नहीं किया जाएगा, तब तक उनका कोई value नहीं है, correct? So various services, they help and aid in the primary sector activities and secondary sector activities. So every economy, it evolves. First it begins as a primary sector economy, then it goes on to become a secondary sector economy, and finally it becomes a tertiary sector economy. So इस तरह का एक एवोल्यूशन होता है, ओके, किसी भी इकोनॉमी का। ये सिर्फ इंडियन इकोनॉमी की मैं बात कर रहा हूँ ऐसी बात नहीं है, एनी इकोनॉमी, it will evolve from being a primary sector economy, then it will become a secondary sector economy, and eventually it will become a tertiary sector economy. Okay, so these are some of the things which are very important. Moving on, how do we count the various goods and services and know the total production in each sector? ये हमें पता कैसे चलेगा? What is the quantum of services and goods that we are producing? Right. So NCERT कहता है that not every good that is produced or not every service which is rendered needs to be counted. Right. It makes sense only to include the final goods and services. Right. जैसे I'm talking about a burger. Right. So burger will have bun. This bun is made of wheat. Right. So agrarian sector में जब wheat बन रहा है, तो उसको काउंट करने की बजाय अगर मैं सिर्फ एक बर्गर को काउंट करूं, तो उसमें भी बर्गर की wheat की कॉस्ट का इंक्लूड हो गई, wheat की वैल्यू इंक्लूड हो गई. Therefore, not every good that is produced and sold needs to be counted. When this wheat was sold to McDonald's to make a bun, and when it need not be counted. It can only be counted when McDonald's sells that burger, right? So you don't have to count your goods and services at every stage of production or at every stage of buying and selling. It makes sense only to include the final goods and services. जो final goods and services हैं, उन्हें आपको गिनना है, right? जैसे 1 kg of rice is sold to a shop, and then that 1 kg of rice is used to make idli. So you rather count idli ka price. 1 kg of rice which was sold at 20 rupees, you don't count that. But that 1 kg of rice से हमने 10 kilos of or rather हम कह सकते कि 10 plates of idli बनाई, and the cost of 10 plates of idli is 100 rupees. So I will count the 100 rupees. I will not count the 20 rupees of rice. Why? Very simple, now, because that rice is being used to make idli. So why should I? So it will be double counting. If I count the final value of rice also, and if I count the final value of selling of idli also, so I might as well just count the value of idli, right? So therefore, we must always take into account the final value of goods and services. Now the question is, why are only final goods and services counted, right? Intermediary goods and services, why are they not counted? That's a question. So in contrast to final goods, goods such as wheat and the wheat flour, which is the example which is seen in the example on your screen, or an infographic on your screen, these are all intermediate goods. They are used at intermediate levels, and intermediate goods are used up in producing final goods and services. So the value of final goods has already includes the value of all the intermediate goods that are used in the making of final good, right? This is suppose आप first करो crane. Crane is a intermediate good. Is it a final good? No. The crane is used to make other goods or other machines like cars, right? So crane in certain examples, in certain contexts, is an intermediate good, right? So the value of final goods and services produced in each sector during a particular year provides the total production of the sector for that year, right? And the sum of the production in these three sectors gives us gross domestic product. We learn about the economy. There is a lot of talk going about the economy right now that our GDP has shrunk by 23.9% in the post pandemic scenario. We always see and check the health of our economy. We always measure our economy in terms of the growth rates which are associated with GDP, gross domestic product. So what is gross domestic product? How would you explain it to a layman? Gross domestic product is the total value of all the goods and services which are produced finally. Total value of all the final goods and services in the economy will give you GDP, ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट. तो क्या इसमें इंटरमीडिएट गुड्स आएंगे? नहीं आएंगे, राइट? क्योंकि कई बार प्रीलिम्स में ऐसे सवाल आते हैं. कंसेप्चुअल क्वेश्चंस आर जनरली आस्क्ड इन प्रीलिम्स. Which of the following are counted in the calculation or the computation of GDP in India? And if one of the options of the answer is intermediate goods, then that option will not be a part of the answer. ये आपको याद रखना है. तो इस तरह concepts, if you understand, if you get a conceptual grip on the subject, you can tackle such questions in UPSC. And trust me, these basic questions are asked in economy in UPSC. So please don't take these NCERTs lightly. I exhort all of you to make timely notes, to make running notes as we are taking forward these lectures. So I hope you have understood what is gross domestic product, and I also hope why you have understood why we don't account for intermediate goods when we are talking about gross domestic product, which is basically the country, the size of a country's economy, right? So gross domestic product is the value of all final goods and services produced within a country during a particular year, right? And obviously, as I've told you, GDP shows the size of the economy. Okay. There are historical changes in the sectors. जैसे आप देखोगे कि 1973-74 में primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector were contributing almost equally. But in 2013 and 14, what we see that the service sector has expanded in India. And the primary sector, although it has also enlarged, the manufacturing sector has also enlarged, but they have not grown at the same rate in which the service sector has expanded and grown in India. मैंने आपसे बताया था कि every economy evolves from being a primary sector economy, then it becomes a secondary sector economy, and finally it becomes a tertiary sector economy. In India today, the proportion of tertiary sector and the amount of value that it adds to the GDP is far greater and far higher than our primary sector and the manufacturing sector. This is how the Indian economy has evolved over a period of time, right? तो इनिशियली हम देखेंगे दैट प्राइमरी सेक्टर वाज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट सेक्टर ऑफ इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी, राइट? बट जब प्राइमरी सेक्टर एक्सपैंड होता है तो आपको मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर की जरूरत पड़ती है. Why do you think that the presence of primary sector is required, or why do you think that primary sector leads to more enlargement of the manufacturing sector? You require that is because this is खेतों में आप ट्रैक्टर चलाते हो, you require harvesters, you require commoners, you require threshers. So all of these products that you are using for primary sector have to be produced by the industrial sector, right? So if the primary sector is expanding, the industrial sector has to expand. Please don't forget this, that the industrial sector has to expand, and over a long time, because of new methods of manufacturing which were introduced, factories have come up and they have started expanding, right? So those people who earlier worked on farms, they now begin working in the factories also, right? Because manufacturing sector, which is a secondary sector, even that is expanding. Why? Because the needs of the primary sector are expanding. So the need of workers and laborers and engineers and floor managers will also rise. So there will be a migration of people from primary sector towards secondary sector as regards employment is concerned, right? So people began to use many more goods which were produced in factories at cheap rates, and secondary sector gradually became the most important sector in total production and employment. Correct? जैसे हम कार्स की बात करते हैं, जैसे ज्यादा लोग सेकेंडरी सेक्टर में काम करेंगे तो उनकी इनकम में भी बढ़ोतरी होगी. इफ देयर इज अ राइज इन देयर इनकम, दे विल स्टार्ट कंज्यूमिंग मोर, दे विल स्टार्ट यूजिंग मोर एंड मोर हॉर्लिक्स, दे विल स्टार्ट eating more, they will start drinking more, they will start using more mobile phones, they will start buying more automobiles, they will start buying more laptops. So don't you think because of that a lot of expansion and a lot of supply has to be made sure from the manufacturing side? Of course, that will also concomitantly lead to an expansion in the manufacturing sector. So पहली दफा क्या हुआ, प्राइमरी सेक्टर एनलार्ज हुआ, उसकी नीड्स बढ़ी, तो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर को एनलार्ज होना ही पड़ा. सेकेंड स्टेज में क्या हुआ, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर में ज्यादा लोगों की जरूरत महसूस हुई. थर्ड स्टेज में क्या हुआ, क्योंकि ज्यादा लोग अभी एम्प्लॉयड है मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर में, सो देयर इनकम्स आर हाई. फोर्थ स्टेज में क्या हुआ, इफ देयर इनकम्स आर हाई, इफ द डिस्पोजेबल इनकम्स ऑफ द पीपल आर हाई, दे विल कंज्यूम मोर, they will consume more products like cars and automobiles and laptops. If they will consume more, then the supply has to be also made more. For that, the manufacturing sector has to expand for the second time. The first time the manufacturing sector expanded was when the needs of the primary sector had expanded. The second time manufacturing sector expands is when the needs of the people also expand, right? All in the last 100 years, there has been a further shift from secondary sector to tertiary sector, especially in developed countries like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, USA, Great Britain, right? क्योंकि जब अब सेकेंडरी सेक्टर इतना फैल गया दैट नाउ यू रिक्वायर मोर बैंक्स, राइट? वो लोगों के पास इतना पैसा आ गया दैट नाउ यू रिक्वायर मोर एंटरटेनमेंट. लोगों की आदतें भी खराब हो गई तो नाउ यू रिक्वायर मोर मेडिकल केयर. लोगों के पास एजुकेशन के लिए पैसा आ गया तो नाउ यू रिक्वायर बेटर एजुकेशनल फैसिलिटीज, राइट? लोग ज्यादा ट्रैवल करने लगे तो नाउ यू रिक्वायर मोर ट्रांसपोर्ट सर्विसेज. सो एज द डिस्पोजेबल इनकम्स ऑफ द पीपल arose, as the disposable incomes of the people increased in because of expansion in secondary sector, the spending on tertiary sector began. जैसे today every household has a Wi-Fi. You're watching this lecture using internet. Internet is what? It's a service, right? So today 4G has become cheap. So that's a service. So don't you think as manufacturing sector expands, your spending power increases. As your disposable income increases, you require more and more services. And therefore the service sector also has to expand. And therefore as a result of that, in the developed world, you will see highest proportion of tertiary sector. So that's how any economy evolves, not just Indian economy. That's how any economy evolves from being a primary sector oriented economy to being a secondary sector oriented economy, and then finally to being a tertiary sector economy, right? So the service sector has become the most important sector in terms of total production. It contributes the highest to gross domestic product, even in case of India. So this is the general pattern observed in the developed countries, right? So this means that the importance of the sectors has changed. Now tertiary sector is the most important sector, right? Now why is the tertiary sector becoming so important in India? Right? Because in any country, several services such as hospitals, educational institutions, post and telegraph services, police stations, courts, village administrative offices, municipal corporations, defense, transport, banks, insurance companies are required. These are basic services. Second, the development of agriculture and industry, which I had just explained to you, that has led to the development of services such as transport, trade, storage. Correct? Third, as the income levels rise, मैंने disposable income की अभी बात की, certain sections of the people they start demanding many more services like eating out, tourism, shopping, right? So you can see this change quite sharply in cities, especially in big cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, Kolkata, Bhopal, Indore, Nagpur, Pune, Delhi, Noida, Gurgaon, Jaipur, right? So that happens. And fourth, over the past decade or so, a new service such as information and communication technology have become important. मैंने इंटरनेट की बात की थी अभी आपसे. ICT, information and communication technology, that has become the biggest service in the world today. Right? The entire world has become a global village today because it has come closer because of internet. And therefore, in 2013 as compared to 1973-74, the contribution of tertiary sector to GDP has become very, very high. Okay, right. So where are most of the people employed? A remarkable fact about India is that while there has been a change in the share of the three sectors in GDP, a similar shift has not taken place in employment. अगर टर्शियरी सेक्टर का इतना कंट्रीब्यूशन रहा है जीडीपी में तो उसका कंट्रीब्यूशन एम्प्लॉयमेंट में ज्यादा रहना चाहिए, बट ऐसा होता नहीं है इंडिया में. वी स्टिल एम्प्लॉय, प्राइमरी सेक्टर स्टिल एम्प्लॉयज, दैट इज द एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर स्टिल एम्प्लॉयज मैक्सिमम नंबर ऑफ पीपल, ऑलमोस्ट हाफ ऑफ इंडिया इज एम्प्लॉयड इन प्राइमरी सेक्टर. सो ये एक इंटरेस्टिंग सिनारियो या ये एक इंटरेस्टिंग कॉन्ट्राडिक्शन आपको ध्यान में रखना पड़ेगा. ये एसेस लिखने के काम में और मेंस के आंसर राइटिंग में बहुत काम में आता है. ऑल द एस्पिरेंट्स, please take a note of this, that tertiary sector contributes the maximum to India's GDP, but when it comes to employment, it is the primary sector which contributes the maximum to job creation in India or giving employment to people in India. So that's some sort of an anomaly in India, right? So this particular infographic will help you realize how it has how the share of sectors in employment may have changed, but the similar shift in pattern in employment is it has not changed, right? So enough jobs were, it is not because it is because enough jobs were not created in the secondary and tertiary sectors. एक तो आज के डेट में you are talking about AI and machine learning in 2020, so most of the jobs are taken up by the machines, ये भी एक कारण है. दूसरा है lack of skill upgradation. जैसे जैसे सेक्टर्स सफिस्टिकेटेड होते गए वैसे वैसे क्या लोगों का स्किल अपग्रेडेशन हुआ? नहीं हुआ, राइट? सो the production in the service sector, it rose by 14 times, but the employment in the service sector rose only about by 5 times, right? And therefore you see that half of the workers in the country are still working in the primary sector, mainly in the agricultural sector, right? So what this means that there are more people in agriculture than necessary. तो होता क्या है कि जो काम दो लोग कर सकते हैं, अब वो काम एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर में 4 लोग कर रहे हैं, तो जरूरत है भी नहीं. सो दिस इज कॉल्ड एज डिसगाइज्ड अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, जो हमने 9th क्लास एनसीईआरटी में बात की, राइट? सो दैट मींस देयर आर मोर पीपल वर्किंग इन एग्रीकल्चर दैन इज नेसेसरी. अरे इंडिया में पॉपुलेशन भी इतना हाई है दैट every sector cannot produce enough jobs for everyone. Okay, so this kind, there is underemployment in India, and this kind of underemployment is hidden, right, in India. Okay, this is also called as disguised unemployment, which I had discussed today also, and which I had discussed in the 9th class NCERTs as well. Now, how to create more employment? So see, every state or region has the potential for increasing the income and employment for people in that area, right? Now it could be tourism, it could be a regional craft industry, or it could be new services like IT. And some of these would require proper planning and support from the government. See, government intervention is absolutely important. Everything cannot be done by the private sector, right? Government has to come out with enabling policy framework to allow the corporates and the industries and even the agriculturalists to have more and more job opportunities. So the central government in India has made a law implementing the right to work in about 675 districts of India. Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005. This is the biggest welfare program. This is the biggest welfare program in the world. Okay, in the world. So under Manrega, all those who are able to and all those who are in need of work in rural areas, माइंड यू रूरल एरियाज, इसी टाइप की इंफॉर्मेशन प्रीलिम्स में जरूरी होती है. हो सकता है आपको स्टेटमेंट दिया जाए दैट एवरीबॉडी इन इंडिया वुड गेट अ जॉब. नहीं, people living in rural areas will get a job under Manrega. So they are guaranteed 100 days of employment in a year by the government. Kitna? 100 days. Okay. So if the government fails in its duty to provide employment, it will give unemployment allowance to the people. Correct? So यहाँ पे भी आप देखेंगे, this is a social security net. This is a safety net provided by government. And the type of work that would in future help to increase the production from land will be given preference under the act. Correct? So these are some of the motivations behind Manrega, and these are some of the parameters of Manrega जो आपको ध्यान में रखना है. राइट? मनरेगा का एग्जाम्पल आप GS2 और GS3 के आंसर्स लिखने में भी जरूर दे सकते हो. ओके, So with this, we have come to the end of lecture number 2 on sectors of Indian economy. In the coming lecture, we will be talking about part 2 of the sectors of Indian economy. So till the time we meet next, this is Rohan Dange signing off from scholar.com. Keep practicing social distancing. Take care.